We don't have microphones in this one. We tested the microphones, it didn't work out very well. So I have to, if you speak, you have to project. There's a mic right there. Higher? More?
Higher.
Higher? Yeah. Sorry. How now? Good afternoon, everyone. Is that better? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first stakeholder meeting for the investigation of electricity wheeling, docket number 2024-0200. My name is Anand Patani. I'm with the commission. I want to thank those who are here in person and those online to taking time during your busy holiday schedule to attend this meeting. As you may recall, in July, after several legislative measures and discussions with the state representatives and senators, the commission opened this investigatory docket into electricity wheeling with initial focus on intra-governmental wheeling. Since July, the commission has reached out to potential stakeholders and emailed a questionnaire to provide some insight into intra-governmental wheeling. The summary of the responses will be shared later in this meeting. I just have a few housekeeping items I want to go over. First, please note that today's meeting is being recorded. And as with other meetings hosted by the commission, we ask that each participant be respectful of time when speaking and the perspectives shared. As this is a hybrid meeting, here are some guidance for those who are participating remotely or online. Please mute yourselves if you are not presenting or speaking. Please raise your hand using the raise hand feature of WebEx. Alternatively, you may physically raise your hand on screen. Somebody may be watching on your screens. And please lower your hand when you are done speaking. Also, you can leverage the chat box in your online to ask questions or make comments. Commission staff will monitor the chat and elevate your questions and comments raised. Also, while this meeting is open to public viewing, in interest of time and ensure that the commission's agenda is fully addressed, commission asks that members of the public wish to ask questions, that their questions be submitted as public comments filed in the commission's case and document management system, the CDMS. Last thing, for those here in person, the restrooms are located in the basement, one floor below, and the codes are posted on the door. PDT is restroom. Okay. All right. So with that, I know it's kind of first meeting, so I was thinking we can do introductions. So we kind of start in here in person. So I'll go and then I'll go maybe to my left and we can go around the room and then we'll go online. So I already introduced myself, Anand Samtani, I'm with the commission. And if you could also state your name, organization, and your role in the organization, that'd be helpful. So go ahead.
I'm Richard Van Drunen with Hawaiian Electric. I'm a regulatory analyst.
Good afternoon, I'm Carlos Perez, Director of Customer Solutions, Hawaiian Electric.
Good afternoon, I'm Peter Young from Hawaiian Electric. I'm the Director of Pricing in the Regulatory Group.
Hi, Ken Aramaki, Hawaiian Electric, Director of T&D Interconnection Planning.
Naomi Hawaii, Commissioner.
Colin Yost, Commissioner.
Mike Angelo, Executive Director, Division of Consumer Advocacy. We also have some of our staff introduced.
Marissa with the State Energy Office, Regulatory Assistant.
With the Commission of
Kelly Rose, I'm Commission Counsel.
Jason Kim, PUC. Sorry, louder. Anderson, a little louder.
Oh, Jason Ken, PUC, Interim Chief Engineer.
Okay, Tim, Andrew, can you have the people online announce themselves? You can tell them who you want.
Please go ahead and announce yourselves, those who are online.
I'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. Joe Viola from Hawaiian Electric.
Henry Curtis with Life of the Land.
Hi, this is Mickey Knox.
Rocky Mold.
Hi, Rocky Mold from the Hawaii Solar Energy Association.
Hi,
Jerry Samita, Carl Smith Ball, representing Ulupono Initiative.
Mark Shimbukuro, Energy Solutions Manager, Hawaiian Electric.
Warren Ching with Department of Water Supply, County of Hawaii, Energy Management Analyst.
Wayne Takara here, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, Chief Planner.
Hi, this
Harley
is Kit.
Broyles with Justice.
Go ahead, Harley.
Sorry, Harley Broyles with Earth Justice. Thank you.
Hi there, this is Kit Batten. I'm with Arizona State University, but I'm supporting the County of Hawaii by monitoring this meeting.
I'm Marcy Chang with the Division of Consumer Advocacy Chief Engineer.
Hi, James Abraham. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Angelo Giri, manager of the non-rates regulatory affairs department.
I'm James Abraham with Hawaiian Electric. In the legal department.
Hi everyone, I'm Noel Takamoto. I'm the Equity Access and Affordability Manager at Hawaiian Electric.
Ellen McKinley, Legislative Analyst, Office of Council Services for the Maui County Council.
Yo Kawanami, Hawaiian Electric, Director of Customer Energy Resource.
Lisa Dangle,
Kylie
Director of System Operations, Maui and Hawaii.
This is Kylie Wager Cruz, also with Earth Justice.
This is Michael Chang from Hawaiian Electric, Manager of Strategic Analytics. Thank you.
Holly Phillips, County of Kauai, Mayor's Office.
Mark Wong with Hawaiian Electric, Customer Energy Resources.
Ryan Tam.
Housing Authority.
Sorry, Ryan
Danielle
Tam.
Canfield Jones. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Ryan Tam, Hawaii Community Development Authority.
Danielle Canfield Jones with Hawaiian Electric Company, Manager for Commercial Client Services. Thank you.
Trina
Hi,
Gall, Department of Environmental Management.
hi, Blaine Cacho, Hawaiian Electric, Manager of Government Client Services. Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's start with Hawaiian Electric. Anyone else from Hawaiian Electric? Then we'll go with the counties and the departments and any other private groups in that order, please. Thank you.
Kevin Walchin, Hawaii Electric, Director of Hawaii Island.
Kursui, Community Affairs, Hawaiian Electric.
Your call from Charles. How is she doing? Is she living?
Doug, you want to announce yourself? We didn't hear from you.
He's offline. Yeah, should we again, won't continue? So the folks who haven't announced themselves, you can put it in the chat. Just put your name and your organization and role. That'll be fine. So Andrew, can you go to the slides for the agenda? Which one to go over the agenda this time? Okay, for today, we'll review the dockets, the docket goals and objectives as proposed by the commission. Next, we will we'll offer Hawaiian Electric time to provide a presentation on requirements, technical feasibility of electricity wheeling, followed by question and answers session. Then we'll have a discussion on the working definition of electricity wheeling. Moving forward, we'll talk about the stakeholder meetings and topics moving forward. And also then finally we'll have next steps. That's where we go. So let me go over the goals and objectives. So this, I just want to make sure everyone's clear on this, because if you remember, this is kind of from the ledge, kind of putting this thing out here. And the idea was to use electricity wheeling as a tool to kind of accelerate renewable energy, uptake. So the thing is that with this one, it was one thing I want to know is if it is in the public interest, right? So the way we envision this commission is that there's 3 phases to this approach. The first phase was the outreach phase, then we have the procedural phase, and then discovery, and then we'll have a decision-making phase. Primary outcome, again, is that we want to make a determination of whether wheeling is in public interest. And if not, if we can identify some alternatives to that, so we can present it to the ledge. And if, again, I know this is kind of focused right now on intergovernmental wheeling. There are other topics we can delve into wheeling, but for now, we want to focus on intergovernmental wheeling. After that, if we have time, we can look at explore other topics if there's time for that. What else? Okay, so right now we're gonna go over the we're gonna offer Hawaiian Electric time to present. Right now, I think Peter's gonna do the presentation, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so if you can pull up the slides for Hawaiian Electric Andrew.
Is Andrew advancing?
Yeah, you just on the next slide. Yeah.
Thank you so
And
much.
you didn't project, yeah, sorry.
Hawaiian Electric appreciates the opportunity to offer this initial overview presentation on intergovernmental electricity wheeling. What we hope to convey here is some general concepts that we believe should be considered in developing the framework for intergovernmental wheeling, both on the operations side and on the economic side. So let us take a few minutes to step through this. Let's go to the next agenda slide, Andrew. So with regard to intergovernmental wheeling of electricity, we want to discuss how does it work? Why should we do it? What might be the challenges related to this? We want to offer some key principles that we believe should apply to wheeling. There are some other important issues that we want to identify. And finally, we want to specifically describe a couple of cases where we have something that embodies wheeling concepts today in Hawaii. So let's go to the next slide. So how does the wheeling work? We have a little picture there of how energy would flow from generation to the grid to the customer. But really the idea here for wheeling is that the generation is remote from energy usage, physically remote, whether it's next door, a different TMK across the utility system, but that's the concept. Let's go to the next slide. Why intergovernmental wheeling? It does provide a customer choice. For a government customer, this allows them to choose whether they want to provide the source of the generation that they want to use to power their agency. With regard to resources, wheeling may allow us to tap into unused land owned by current government customers, and that can unlock more space for renewable development and get us more renewable energy. Finally, with regard to economics, there may be an opportunity for government customers to reduce their total energy costs. Let's go to the next slide. What are the challenges for intergovernmental wheeling? This is not an exhaustive list, but we did want to share what we thought were some high points. Wheeling should create benefits for participants, non-participants, and the utility grid. There are considerations for both operations and economics. We need safe and reliable operation of the grid. We don't want to see a position of unnecessary costs on other customers. And finally, there needs to be a lot of good work put into the design and thoughtful administration of any wheeling program so that there are no unintended consequences. Let's go to the next slide. Safety is first, safety is paramount, and to the extent that wheeling brings us new generation to the system, we must be able to manage a generation addition to the grid safely. Let's go to the next slide. With regard to customer choice, as we mentioned a few slides ago, having wheeling may provide the opportunity to unlock a land or space resource that allows us to increase renewable energy to the entire system. And we need to discuss what these options are and how they might work for a customer. Let's go to number 3. I'm going to read these because these are really important to us. Reliability of the electric system, the reliability and resilience of the public utilities electric grid must not be compromised. And as long as the wheeling project is grid connected, it must be subject to relevant interconnection performance requirements. Let's go to the 4th. With regard to aiding the development of renewable energy, the idea is that wheeling should increase renewable energy for the benefit of the entire community. Let's go to the 5th point. Clearly, any wheeling concept needs to be in alignment with existing laws, such as the utilities 100% renewable portfolio standard. Wheeling should also support and align with what the companies are doing to comply with these laws. So there needs to be that tracking and alignment. Let's go to the 6th point. With regard to equity, any burden from wheeling on other customers should be balanced with the benefits. And here we can have discussions about operational considerations and benefits, as well as those that are economic. And let's go to the next slide. So here is really an invitation to all of us in the group as we work towards developing or considering a concept that might work. We need to do the good work and make sure that we've addressed the issues and avoid unintentionally undermining other priority objectives. It's just an awareness of where wheeling may cross over with all the other good work that's being done. On the next slide, we offer a couple of other wheeling issues for consideration. With regard to jurisdiction over wheeling participants, we ask, will wheeling customers, meaning those who are generators and putting wheeling energy into the system, will they be identified as regulated utilities or non-regulated participants? And then further in the specifics, will commission approval be required for all wheeling projects prior to development? And certainly with regard to utility planning, how will wheeling projects impact our long-term resource planning? On our last slide, we discuss what we consider to be forms of wheeling today. Both of these programs are in tariff, community-based renewable energy. CBRE, the shared solar program, does have participants, as many of you are aware. The microgrid tariff, which allows a customer to provide energy and energy services to other customers in the microgrid, that tariff is in place and it does not have any customers currently. That's what we have. And I
Right.
appreciate the opportunity to step through that quickly.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that presentation. So we're now gonna offer time for questions. And I was gonna offer the folks who are from state agencies or local agencies to kind of ask any questions they may have. If they don't have any right now, I mean, I'm not answering this, but I just want to make that offer right now to any state agencies, because we're focusing right now on intergovernmental meeting. That's why I just want to make sure they have the same, meeting.
Ask one, Mike Angelo.
Oh, yeah.
Consumer advocacy. Thank you for that presentation, Peter, and I appreciate laying out the fundamentals and a lot of things that we certainly support on there that, everyone needs the benefit. Any thoughts, at least initially, on if this were to be approved and new generating sources were coming online, how we would think about both from the resiliency, the reliability perspective, modeling that power flow and how that power flow would reach the end use customer, and also how you come about, the dollars associated with that and what additional costs or not may be associated with injecting power at one point, receiving it.
There's a technical part at front and economic part. Karen, can you start, please? Yeah, I appreciate that.
On the what it takes to interconnect, depending on what level, like what size the generators are, it's essentially similar to any other utility scale project that goes onto the grid. You're transferring power from one area into the grid, and then at some other point on the grid, power is drawn, right? It's no different than today. And so when you add a generator at a specific point, you would have to model that, do an interconnection study. I'm generalizing because it depends on making megawatt levels. It depends on where you interconnect, right? How big the line is, what kind of, if it has any impact to stability, etc. That's going to generate other requirements, system upgrades that may be required. And so there's no one size fit all required.
If I could ask again on the economics again, particular.
Just generally, so power flows according to the laws of physics. Are you contemplating the magnitude of power that would reach the end use customer and how that would factor in, and then what the associated costs would be with that, or the benefits, and how you're going to?
Yeah, I think that requires consideration of what the wheeling transaction is going to be. And I'm just going to offer this as an illustration. When it starts, where a third party is putting generation into the system, it looks upfront, it looks like an IPP transaction, right? Where energy is being put into the system for the benefit of all customers, at least to start. And then, how does that get paid for? That kind of depends on what the other end of the transaction is and whether the generator has some say in where that energy goes and who has benefit for that transaction, so that it's actually differentiated from it just an IPP injection into our system. So the terms of those economics would need to be sorted, but they could be different. It would have to be different.
It would have to be. And then do you anticipate like a location component to the pricing? That getting ahead of, there's a lot of
that's running ahead. There's a lot of ifs. The concept, we appreciate when folks discuss the concept of locational components, because that, in the concepts that makes sense. To the extent that we're managing a program where we have to repeat transactions, can we include a locational component that's manageable, that's administratively feasible, quite frankly. And we're speaking of this, of course, from the electric company side. We got to be able to fairly administer this to folks who are eligible to participate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think Commissioner Copley also has a follow-up.
All right, I just want to interject a little bit. explore this concept of locational component. To me, that doesn't make sense because of the way that electrons flow. You go through your normal interconnection review, which has to happen, right? That's from a reliability and safety point of view. But as we all know, the electrons are going to flow to the nearest load, wherever the electrons are generated. That's just the way it works. There's no way to somehow designate that electrons generated on the west side are going to flow to Hawaii Cup. That's not going to happen probably ever because there's lots of load in the way in the distribution transmission system. So why is that relevant? I guess is my bigger question. And shouldn't we focus instead on the reasonable cost of accepting that power into the system and considering mostly the amount that Hawaiian Electric will receive when it is consumed by other customers, right? Kind of in a similar way to any other distributed generation function. That seems to be the primary economic formula that would be rational in this situation. So I'm part of what we don't want to try to, as the commission, direct the parties to come to any particular framework. But I think simplicity is something that we sort of cited from the beginning, and remembering kind of the foibles of the green tariff and other past efforts to come up with similar programs that got bogged down pretty quickly in complicated formulas and structures that never got anywhere. So I mean, to the extent that this is feasible at all, some kind of rational, simplistic structure that makes sense to all parties, it's fair to all parties, it's probably the only way that this program will work. So without saying exactly what that should look like, I just want to mention that again as a kind of a guiding principle. So maybe a reaction to that. I mean, if you have something else to offer in terms of locational concerns that you think is relevant, it would be useful to know sooner rather than later so we can understand where that concern comes from and how we can evaluate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate that guidance. Our intent here is, at least initially, is not to shut off any discussion initially, even though we probably have our own positions on locational value and some possible outcomes of a wheeling transaction, however it may be set out. I think we'll have an opportunity maybe today or later on to focus in on what those structures might be. But yeah, we sort of, as the utility that is hosting this transaction, we wanted to make sure that folks have the opportunity to explore what they might consider exploring, if that's fair.
Okay, yeah, we can revisit it. Just looking for specifics.
Anyone from state agencies or local agencies that want to ask any questions of HECO or Hawaiian Electric? Given this is intergovernmental wheeling focusing on right now.
Can I ask on behalf of the County of Hawaii? This is Kit Batten. I have had my hand up for a little while.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity today and to ask these questions. About the statement that was made earlier about just a question around whether the intragovernmental wheeling would be a regulated utility or not. And I've been thinking through examples of, municipal-led electricity service in other states around the country. And most municipal utilities are not regulated by their public utilities commissions, nor are, if you take the model of a consumer choice aggregation model in cooperation with a government like City of Oakland in California, that's also not a regulated entity by the Public Utilities Commission. So I'm just curious about that question and kind of where potentially a model in your minds is where a county run, for example, renewable energy project would then be a regulated entity. So that's part one. Part two is I'm also really curious whether HECO has some proposals around whether their vision is that I'm just going to use the county as an example of a government. County governments would be working directly with HECO on the installation, design, et cetera, of these renewable energy projects, or if this would be open to independent power producers, and then how that would impact interconnection questions depending on which route we went. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We're, at this point, our understanding is we're just looking at governmental and government-like entities for participation. And was there more that we need to say about the interconnection issue?
So I think we would handle the interconnection just depending. It doesn't matter who's building it. We would still need to do the interconnection study, figure out what's needed to interconnect, and then those types of requirements would go into it. It should be pretty much agnostic whether the utility built it or another entity built it.
Okay. Okay, great. And sorry, I was confused. I don't think most county or city governments are going to have the expertise on staff to do this kind of work. So of course they're going to have to work with either HECO or another external entity to set up renewable energy generation.
Thanks.
Andrew, need your hands up from actually, I have a kind of question too about just to help maybe facilitate the conversation too. Is so how do you guys, I guess, how do you envision like maybe intergovernmental wheeling? How do you envision intergovernmental wheeling kind of working out? Like, I mean, you have like some type of initial scenario you're thinking about, like, I mean, I'm just curious if you have anything in mind, like when you think of intergovernmental wheeling implementing it, how would it look like, and again, these are all initial thoughts that, we're not going to look into it. I just kind of want to kind of get the thoughts going and discussion going.
So on the technical side, I think Ken or Rocky has described that we have a process for that consideration. Right. So on the program side, I think there's an opportunity to consider what a wheeling transaction would look like and how that compares to transactions we currently have. At the outset, we described, at least on the generation side, for energy going into the system, that kind of looks like an IPP PPA. If you extend that a little further, let's move over and look at our existing programs, our DER programs, where right now customers have the opportunity behind the meter at their own service location to generate their own power. They can simultaneously self-consume that power, and they have the opportunity to export that power. But you have a situation where there is generation and load from the same customer at the same site. How would wheeling differ for a wheeling customer who has generation in one location and its own load center or consumption at some other location? Can we draw or build on the DER models to structure a transaction where what are the elements of that particular generation and remote consumption? What are the elements that are similar to, and we can use what we currently understand from DER programs and IPP transactions, and what are different, and what are the consequences of those differences, and how do they impact, the utility system, the service levels, the benefits and costs for the participant, benefits and costs for the non-participants. Those are kind of the things that we're thinking aloud about initially.
I guess it sounds like it's more like a credit system, right? It's not like they're not paying cost to utilize the lines, right? Basically, it's more like if they transmit the electricity, they'll get the quick out CPRE, DER, right? Like you were saying earlier, right? So it would be like contract you guys get, a standard from contract rate about PPA, depending on the size or capacity, right, of the generation. Then you'd get that whoever generating it and electricity would get potentially credit, or are you guys looking more like if they're going to use your lines, you pay for it like they do on the mainland, right?
Yeah, well, I think what we described there was trying to work from what we know and what we've all experienced. So what is it from the IPP transaction or from the DER program transaction that we can use structurally that makes it, is then a wheeling transaction more like something we have
right
now? Can we build it now? We're not saying that it has to be that way, but you asked, what are we thinking?
Right,
about?
right. Yeah.
And we're reaching out to, the transactions that we know and that we currently administer.
It's just kind of like the hybrid, microgrid, right? Like that they use the DER, right? Whatever is currently available in the tariffs right now, right?
Right.
So whether CGS plus, whether those rates are, right? Basically, you'll get credit for them. Yeah. No, I was kind of curious because I guess some people, this is also confusion they had in life, like what is wheeling? And then I guess it's confusion whether are they getting credit or are they paying for for the use of the lines, and like Commissioner Yo said, the electrons will go directly to one place to another. You can't direct the electrons, So so you have to. It's up to the utility, to either credit, that facility who's generating energy, or I don't know if it's a microgrid, they would have to pay the lines to use it. I was kind of curious about how you envision that. I guess the economic side of it.
Yeah, we think it's hard just to define wheeling as a term. You actually have to define what do you mean by wheeling as a transaction.
Right, and that's what we have.
And that's the building blocks will emerge from that.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into. Later on in this meeting. I just want to make sure if anybody else has any questions, I guess from the state or local agencies. Is it Andrew? Is that somebody?
This is Joe Boyle. If I could just jump in for a second with the question. It's a good question. I get on my team probably gets nervous when I speak because we haven't had a chance to talk a lot. But I think ultimately the way we see this is it's a tariff, right? And it's if you meet these conditions, if you do these certain things, if you provide these benefits, you'll get this benefit back. And I think whatever that goes back to the customer, I agree with what Commissioner Yo said. We want this to be relatively simple. If you do these things, you'll get a benefit. And the cost of using the grid, the cost of whatever else is in there, I think that's what we're gonna have to spend time on. How is that valued? What's a good proxy for that? But it should probably just fold into and be a net product of what the credit that goes back to the customer. We realize we want the government agencies to donate their land so that they benefit our grid and our community by bringing renewable energy on. And it should be simple enough where they can do their own calculations, decide whether they want to work with a third party or not. They know what they'll be getting back. And it's a tariff transaction, just like our DER tariffs that you get. If you meet those conditions, you get interconnected. Thanks.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to like CBRE in terms of like you taking out the subscriber rate. So you just have subscriber organization, a developer and a subscriber in one, and then you go just a one-to-one relationship basically. But then you get the credit based on whether it's, like I said, a sample contract would be set fixed rate, or maybe a PPA, depending on lump sum, whatever you guys decide to how you want to approach it. Okay. Any other questions? Well, I want to actually, Andrew, do you see a hand up? I think I see somebody else.
Yes, Kevin. Hi, I just wanted to add on to, I think when we're talking about examples, I think we're starting with the examples where we already made some decisions in terms of limiting the size. So the cost impacts are very different. So I think you're right in terms of defining what are we talking about wheeling and what are the needs of the government agencies? Because if they're talking about larger um, sizes of projects, right, it's going to present different problems than like we're talking about when we did the microgrid, for instance, right, in terms of limiting the size or the impacts to the system. So I think part of it is defining kind of the uses before we get to the cost and the allocation of cost, because I think part of it is just knowing what are we talking about when we're talking about wheeling, because some of these projects, right, compete with our existing IPP procurements for our normal procurement of renewable energy. So we want to make sure that the sizes and everything and how it makes sense for the whole system as a whole. But I think that's part of what we need to do as a group here is really define what are we talking about. I know you're asking for examples, but I think we're looking to you folks too in terms of are we talking about limiting sizes? Location does matter to some degree, but we can talk about those issues a little bit later. But I think it adds in terms of cost, in terms of what facilities and things that we have available to interconnect with, and who's going to bear those costs, right? Is it going to be the utility or is it going to be the cost causers in this place, in this case? So I think those are some of the issues that we kind of outlined in our initial presentation. But I think the questions you're asking are exactly the things I think we need to be tackling. And what are we talking about in terms of intergovernmental wheeling? What is the expectation there? Thank you.
Yeah, like I think Commissioner Yo said earlier that, a lot of these agencies don't have the technical expertise. So we're trying to kind of put the question out there maybe for them, kind of like how would it look like, for them and how they could participate if it was to be a tariff. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Commissioner.
Kevin, I have a question. You're saying, I guess along those lines of what you're saying is, does HECO have a proposal as to the amount that would be acceptable under the intergovernmental wheeling type of scenario?
In terms of size.
Yeah, right.
Size of project. Do you have a different categories of size that make a difference already in your view?
I can't really speak in terms of having a limit, but we do analyze, right, in terms of when we're trying to procure in our whole plans, right, our whole generation plans, we do have what we're looking for in terms of renewable energy. And right now, the way it's probably done within our IPP and our procurement, right, in our RFPs, trying to analyze exactly what we're looking for. So if we can get that at a lower price or something competitive with that, I think those, you can have size. I guess it's not really a size limit, but it's going to be taking from one to the other, right? If you can procure it in a different way, right? It's a different mechanism for procurement for competing against the same IPPs that we're trying to get in terms of in our current process.
So just to throw a couple other issues out there relating to what you're saying, what would happen if that proposed project had a battery storage component to it that was offered up as a dispatchable resource for HECO to use in flexible ways? Perhaps it could even accept, generation from other places nearby on the grid, like KES does, right? It just would be helpful if you could start thinking about a number of different ways this could go, because it's likely that some government actors will have very large areas of land that might be available. Some of those areas might be in parts of the islands that don't have any current energy development, and might be a new opportunity to bring a generation resource online. So it would be, I think, helpful for HECO to start thinking about geographic issues, about the differences between non-battery storage and standalone, standalone and battery storage added, those kinds of issues to help us walk through the different possibilities as we try to figure this out.
Also, just so later on in the meeting, we have a point where we're going to talk about topics, and that could be like part of the topics for the conversation, for future stakeholder meetings, about hosting capacity, all that, about transmission, distribution, interconnection, all that, you know, there could be topics, future stakeholder meetings.
The other thing just to throw out there, you did point out that it would be helpful, you think, if somehow there could be a component of additional community benefit. I assume close to wherever the generation is happening. The commission's interested in that too. We've talked about that, whether it could somehow flow into a resilience hub benefit. And again, that's a flexible idea that could be appropriate in certain circumstances. So just try to think ahead and plan ahead to different opportunities. Perhaps discussion in this docket can, you know, bring to light some of those opportunities.
I just had a comment. I think that's helpful context. What you just said, it sounds like we're more like in this, for our IPPs, it's 5 megawatts and above for all who is what we consider utility scale. Sounds like we're in that range. I mean, basically any standards or requirements in the IPPs or in the RFPs, sorry, in the RFPs would pretty much apply to this type of situation. Yeah. Like there, I don't think there's a way that you can say you can put, you know, for saying 20 megawatts, you can't just necessarily say you can put it anywhere, or if it meets this checklist, like you can put it here. You still have to study whatever location you're looking at.
Right, but I assume that there are opportunities here because you have state agencies to site projects that aren't available to private developers. So again, going to Commissioner Yos's thoughts, I mean, this should allow you folks a little bit more development flexibility. But we're turning to you folks to say, okay, what is the limit that would allow you folks to still carry on and not worry about the grid per se, but also help sustain the grid? I think battery storage alleviates a lot of the concerns that you folks are having. That's my view. Because it can.
For something maybe picking up on the commissioner saying, if you already have renewable energy zones, right? If there are concept, we could do something similar, maybe smaller projects, so that the grid is obviously not plug and play, but if there's a greater likelihood to de-risk projects coming in from the standpoint of the government agency, they could interconnect and would understand what the costs associated with that. And considering device type, so standalone solar versus a hybrid project or standalone battery or something.
I mean, I think we can do high level assessments of certain locations, and then we can look at that. Is that what we're thinking about? I can't say today, just like, yeah, it sounds like, yeah. I mean, I think the better way is probably providing the, you know, certain locations, generally what megawatts are being looked at, and then we can look at like what those injections look like. Does that make sense?
So rather than a hosting capacity, seeing what projects are interested and going from there, actually doing it opposite way. Like rather than having a hosting capacity and cost associated with a general location, you're saying that, having projects who are already interested in interconnecting and studying it from that perspective.
Be ideal, but I don't know what areas you guys are talking about.
Talking about two things. One, reliability, right? Making sure that the.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean location.
And then locations,
yeah.
Trying to get an idea to de-risk if I understand what the commissioners are saying. To de-risk from a project standpoint for the developer to come in, for the government or agency who's interested in siting the project, so that they have confidence that they're going to get interconnected and understand maybe what cost. Whatever.
I think the things we can look at again. We don't have to have an answer now, but I think the idea makes sense, right? In terms of we have preferential places where we like to see generation develop too. I think that's what they're getting at, is there's zones and preferred areas that we want to see it, so we can kind of identify those types of areas to make things or to de-risk rate the development. So I think there are good points to be made.
And if you have like there's an area that it's ideal, and then you have a government agency or building nearby that area, you could benefit from that if they know that that's available, that they can also benefit from it and de-risking it. But again, all of this we're just going out, it's very high level. We're not looking into anything right now. We just wanted to kind of open the discussion. And I think the key thing is that after this meeting, we set up some stakeholder meetings and identified some topics that we can kind of get delved into those issues at that time. But yeah, I think right now we just want to make sure that the state agencies, local agencies are aware of if they want to participate, how do they participate? What are the benefits? That's kind of what I think we wanted to make sure they're aware of. So like you said, like location or site, a lot of things that it's expensive for people to, right? That's one of the biggest costs, right? So the land costs, right? To use the site control. Anyway, so any other questions that anybody has? I just want to make sure I put it out there for the state agencies, local agencies. If not, I'm going to turn it over to commission staff because I know we have some questions. Questions, Andrew? Nothing. Any hands up? No. Okay. You guys have any questions?
Yeah.
Wait.
Jason Kim, PUC. When we consider compensation to the utility, typically in wheeling, we consider compensation for P&D. Have you guys considered compensation for kind of the value added that you provide? Because if a wheeler exports energy and it's an intermittent source where it's not very clean, but we leave the person that technically is receiving that power is receiving nice clean power. Do you consider any type of compensation for that kind of value added that you do?
Well, can we break that up into two parts? Because the customer who really whoever is receiving electricity, I assume this is not a new customer, they're an existing customer. So they're already receiving electricity for the terms of our conditions of service too, right? And they should be getting the reliability and the clean power, and that should be reflected in the retail rates that they are already paying. So I think that part of the transaction for the customer who's using energy doesn't change. It doesn't change for that person. But energy is being put onto the system. The question is, how does that transaction change? Is it an IPP transaction where you just put energy on the system, have arrangements and ways to develop that transaction right now? But what we don't have is a transaction where an IPP or a third party says, I can designate my energy to go to a particular customer. What does that transaction look like? And I think that needs to be looked at within the context of electric system. This is far different from the mainland where you might have you have transmission organizations that are involved, and you might have somebody generating outside your system going across your system and sending electricity to somebody on the other side of your jurisdiction. And that's where the like or compensation, it says per kilowatt hour for use of transmission systems or transmission and distribution systems is traditionally thought of. We don't have it here in Hawaii, so we need to understand what a transaction might look like as it goes through our system, because it's probably going to start within our system and within our system. We have costs, we have background, we just need to see, okay, if we change those terms a bit, how does the allocation of that cost responsibility change? I think that's a large area of discussion.
And that's what the EAs could do, is look at, that option, right, which may be more costly and challenging, right? Versus an alternative with the existing tariffs or whatever you have in place already, So that gives a good contrast sometimes, to the ledge, I guess, we spend in terms of what is, it was in the market interest, and if so, what would be, the use of wheeling, whether that different forms of wheeling.
Yeah, we have an opportunity
Yeah.
to find out
Yeah.
the transaction.
Right. Exactly.
Different.
That's why we kept it open, right?
Yeah.
We said transaction content would be based on a contract, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Commissioners, any questions from commissioners? CA?
Not with anybody online.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, Neil, online, Andrew. Questions? No. Okay, so that gets to the next topic, which is the working definition of, Andrew, can you put up the slide? Thanks. So we put this out in the order. I think we put it out in some letters too, in terms of the working definition. We use the EIA definition. See that there. So yes, the movement of electricity from one system to another over transmission facilities of interconnected systems. Wheeling service contracts can be established between two or more systems. So that's kind of the definition. We're it's very broad right now, but we wanted to put it out there. We want to know if I know we always also talk the bottom ones, but Commission notes that there's specific types of wheeling and what can be intergovernmental wheeling, and also we have like the commercial retail wheeling as well. But I guess we wanted to look at the first definition, whether you guys are okay with that definition, and or we need to expand it or edit, modify it. And we wanted to use this as a starting point, because I think it'd be helpful if we have a consistent, working definition that the parties agree on. Any thoughts for anybody? Go ahead.
I guess, again, we're just
Yeah.
spitballing ideas.
Yes.
Okay, so you're kind of going from one generating source, outside of initially outside of the electric.
Yeah.
So that's transmitting across to an end user using line electric system. So not just necessarily transmission system, right? Distribution system as well. So you can incorporate just line electric grid, whoever's the generator, whoever's the end user.
I will note it's not just wine electric, it is open to KIUC too.
Okay, well, yeah, sorry. The electric utility, the local.
Yeah, we can modify that. Go ahead, Commissioner Niels.
I'm not sure this is a useful definition for Hawaii.
Okay.
Because of just the nature of how our grid operates. I think that this is a very standard definition. This is kind of semantics. Wheeling is a made-up term. Doesn't really have a technical meaning. We heard some examples from the legislature of people who are frustrated by their inability as a government entity to do certain things. One example is, there's a large gymnasium that's near a school but not connected to the school. There's a house in between the gymnasium and the school. Why shouldn't the gymnasium be able to put a whole bunch of solar on the roof and send that power to the school that's across TMKs but very nearby? That's a specific technical definition of wheeling, where one customer or one parcel, which is not contiguous to another, is providing power to that other parcel that's nearby. But that's likely not what would happen very often in what we're discussing now. It's much more a generation source that is far away from the other loads connected to that same customer. And it may well be that if we get into retail wheeling, wholesale wheeling, other types of smaller wheeling traditional, maybe more traditional wheeling in the way this definition is set up. We may get into more nuance and complexity as to how that type of system should be set up. But when we're just talking about intergovernmental wheeling, I'm not even sure it makes sense to connect a generator to a user, right? It's just, if it's the county of Honolulu, that's the generator, it probably is unnecessarily complex to say that we want this amount generated by the land that's on top of a, inactive landfill to Honolulu Hollow as the user. Like that probably is unnecessarily complicated, and rather it would just be whatever fair economic formula is established that provides a credit to the county, right? So this definition, I think, is not great. And I think it'd be helpful for us to consider, in our discussions, whether we want to change this definition or whether we want to decide that wheeling is even the right word, honestly. So I think we should just be a little open-minded, in terms of how we try to figure this out.
No, definitely. I mean, we just pick this as a starting point, and the reason why is that if you remember the lead session, there was confusion about wheeling. I mean, like, they're talking about like the payment or use of the lines. Once they talk about like more CBRE credit, which is it right now? That's why we wanted to kind of get some type of consensus on, for at least for the work, this group here, what wheeling means to us, especially on the intergovernmental side. And I totally agree. It's like, it's almost like one side was arguing one thing, the Senate side, the House side has another definition of wheeling. So we wanted to kind of get some idea of like from this group, what is wheeling, our working definition. And this is not necessarily what we wanted, to go with really. It's just maybe kind of like a starting point, just for a conversation starter, because that's typically what, if you think about wheeling, that's what it is. When you think of wheeling, it's usually the mainly when you think about this, the use of the lines, right? Typically, and the payment for those, the use of the lines, right? So, but the thing is that the LES had a very different idea of it. So we wanted to kind of come with our own definition for Hawaii, So either we're going to call it wheeling or we're going to say it's not wheeling. I don't know how you want to define it. That's the thing. So we're going to say if this wheeling is in the public interest, okay, what is wheeling first, right? But if it's CBRE and CBRE is not wheeling, then like we were saying it is now, I don't know. I'm just going to try to find out where that definition is. How do we define wheeling right now? And because once we define that wheeling, then we can define whether it's in the public interest. Because like if it includes CBRE, it could be. Wheeling could be in public interest. Yeah. So I don't know. Any thoughts? Sorry.
Well, just to clarify, we said
we said
CBRE,
right? No,
wheeling characteristics.
Right, characteristics. Okay.
We didn't say that it was wheeling.
Yeah.
But we at Hawaiian Electric in our discussion, we are challenged by the use of the term.
Exactly.
Which is why we think that there are common characteristics of transactions that we want to address, and that could be maybe what is wheeling in Hawaii. We understand the challenge of reporting back to the legislature within the context of the wheeling term. But we do think we have the opportunity to define what that is here.
Yeah, and I think that's the key first step here, right? Is defining what that is, a working definition, so we can ask the question whether it's in the public interest, which is our ultimate goal.
I think you have to be careful too, because the legislature did their bill. They were looking at the entirety. It was retail wheeling. We're the guys who went in and said, if we're going to do it, let's just focus on how we can help governmental agencies, right? Because they may have land or for generation purposes, or in the case of, it might be a school that wants to lower their electric bill, right? Every year, right? They go up to the ledge, they go and say, I need some more money because I gotta pay my electric bill or whatever, right? So that, it was really the testimony of the PUC to say, if we're gonna look at this, let's look at a smaller chunk. Now, I understand in here that we're gonna have to define wheeling, right? And there's intergovernmental wheeling, right? There's pros and cons to all of that. And then should, right? The way I envision it is you want to pilot it with governmental agencies first, right? With the understanding that you know what retail wheeling means, right? It means opening it up to a bigger market, right? And same thing, right? You're gonna have pros and cons on if you get to that level, right? But we're not saying at this point, right, the framework, if there is a framework to come out of this, right? Because you guys could come out at the end of this discussion and say, this ain't gonna work in Hawaii. That's okay too, right? That's the report we're gonna tell the ledge, right? I think part of this is, and Peter, you and Carlos know, right? We started this discussion 20 years ago, right? With one docket and we never got anywhere, right? But the idea is still there, right? And so part of my thinking on accepting, this docket is to really, once and for all, let's figure it out. And if it doesn't work, we're gonna tell people it doesn't work, right? And so be it, right? But I hold hope that there is, right, a day that we can use the framework, right? And I'm not even saying, at the end of this year, 2025, that 2026, we're gonna start the framework, right? To me, it's like, it's gonna be in the toolbox, because there are probably gonna be things we're gonna figure out, right? Even just for intergovernmental wheeling. Right? We're not gonna figure it out by the end of next year. Right? There's gonna be kind of like devil in the details that gotta be figured out before you actually implement. But I wanted, if anything, if it is feasible, then it's in the toolbox. Right? Then one day we can pull it out and go, we're ready to do intergovernmental wheeling. And then we know if we want to get to the next part, retail wheeling, then there's extra work we're gonna do, right? It's not like we just carry it over. All right, and that's what I probably want to hear from like the non-governmental guys that are in the cloud, right? Like, is that your thinking too? Because if it's not, if you want to jump to retail wheeling, then right, that's a whole different discussion than what we have planned for this particular working group. But that's how I see it, right? I mean, is it feasible? But we certainly need a definition, and it's specific to intergovernmental wheeling, right? That's this type of wheeling. It's going to take these characteristics. This is going to be the mechanism, etc. Right? Retail wheeling is outside of it, right? We can define it, but we're not going to tackle it. Right? In this working group, it's just for a different working group, a year later, 2 years later, I don't know when. I don't have a specific time frame around.
Chair session was saying that, like it's just gonna be a tool in the toolbox, right? And it's kind of like the microgrid tariff. We haven't really used it, but it's there, right? We need it, right? So that's kind of the idea. And I think that the deal with the ledge is that they just want to increase renewable energy, basically, and they're looking at different alternatives, different techniques or tools to use to accelerate that process. And they're just kind of using wheeling as one. So there was a discussion of course talk about CBRE. I know they talked about that, so other things that was in the lab session they talked about to kind of accelerate the process. But like even that definition there, like that's what's wondering, if that's the definition of wheeling, then what we're doing is not wheeling then, right? If we go the route for each government, that's the thing, like that means that's what I was trying to kind of juxtapose that, So anyway, and again, we can come up with, like Chair Such was saying, our own definition, the definition for intergovernmental wheeling, or we don't want to even call it intergovernmental wheeling, we may call it something else, so we can separate it from traditional definition of wheeling. And I know it gets complicated. There's so many, to putting it. Anybody had any thoughts? Oh, you know what? I couldn't answer the question. Oh, Henry has a question here. Well, go ahead.
I'm reading your question, but you're saying in the same time frame. What is the time frame that you're talking about? Like in and out on the same day, or right? Is it over a month?
Sorry to keep harping on. I don't think it's relevant, Henry. I think electricity goes in instantaneously, gets used. That's not really the issue, I don't think.
Sorry, I can't see it. The answer to the answer
Says, does the electricity added and the electricity removed have to be in the same time frame? I don't know, Henry, if you want to elaborate on the question, but.
Yeah, wheeling could be thought of as a transfer. You're putting it in and taking it out at the same time, or it could be thought of as an accounting mechanism where it doesn't matter when you put it in and when you take it out.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but my kind of harping that I'm trying to do is that I think it's more simple if it's more of an accounting transaction rather than trying to figure out what electrons are doing. I think that will unnecessarily complicate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. I think really what we're talking about is, and it's a good point. I took it for granted, but when you think about the definition, it's probably important to make sure we're all on the same page. But I think what we're talking about is, can a customer generate electricity on one property and get a credit, get a benefit on their account that's not associated with that property? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I think it's a legal fiction, right? Electrons go into the grid, they're going to come out somewhere. But really what we're creating is just, if you provide a benefit in one location, can you get a benefit on an account that's not tied to that location? That's the TMK issue that we have to get over.
I think that a couple of questions just to throw out, and I know we're going to get into the, but as far as the feedback goes, I think that who owns the generation is part of the potential for the definition of wheeling, and then who is selling to whom is, I think, a big concern. Obviously, the Maui representative was discussing, is it that we would own the generation? Would we contract with an IPP? Would it be Hawaiian Electric owning the generation? So I think that that's the other big point of finding the definition is who's actually owning this generation. I think that that's a big concern that we're seeing. Which also ties into who is selling to whom, because the concept of wheeling is that you can sell it back, not just to your electric service provider, they could sell it openly, which is not a concept that we have here. So who is then selling to whom, I think is the concern.
Yes.
I think for simplicity, it's really just the government entity selling it to HECO. Selling is maybe the wrong word. I mean, again, we're talking about some other accounting mechanism that establishes a fair value for the credit for the account, like Joe said. So I think I think it was actually a representative from the county of Hawaii who was speaking earlier, not Maui, but she, I believe, was talking about what happens if the county contracts with a private developer to build the generating facility and maybe even operate it, but it would still be owned by the county. There would have to be a clear line of ownership between the generator and the account holder who's receiving the credit, I would think. It would get too complicated if somehow an IPP received the credit that did not have a load of its own, but just got direct payment. I don't think that's what we're talking about. And maybe that's one distinguishing characteristic between this type of program and an PPA relationship, right? You're not actually just paying someone for generating power. There has to be an offsetting load account somewhere else on Hawaiian Electric system that receives a credit.
It's very similar, like CBRE, it's like on multiple of those projects, they have Shake Energy as a developer, right? But they don't get the credit. It's the, it's this driver organization that gets credit. So you can contract out, but the developer wouldn't get it. It has to be the organization that's all gets the actual credit. Okay, so if you guys remember earlier, we sent out a questionnaire. So we asked about 11 respondents, I guess, 11 people, 11 organization responded to those questions and included about the definition, whether they're interested in participating. So I'm gonna ask Andy to share kind of like the summary of the results of that.
Hi, everybody. Abby Rowe with the commission. Andrew.
Andrew, you good?
Great. Yeah, so we received 11 responses from government organizations. So I'm going to summarize them quite briefly, especially in the interest of time. So regarding understanding of what wheeling is and the potential benefits and costs, we found that there was a general understanding. A lot of that might have come from the background that we provided. But there was also a general understanding of the potential benefits, including meeting the renewable energy goals, and also potentially offsetting costs, electricity costs. There was more uncertainty from the stakeholders regarding the potential costs. Yeah. So summarizing interest, there was a range of interest levels. Over half of respondents were primarily interested in wheeling within their own organization, but some respondents did express interest in wheeling to other government agencies because they didn't have, that much need for load themselves. Regarding concerns and questions about wheeling, the feedback we got mostly revolved around the technical feasibility, the cost implications, and the roles PPAs might play. Regarding storage, about a third of respondents were interested in generating and storing energy for later delivery, but that did not seem like a primary interest point for most of, this small sample of respondents. Regarding compensation, respondents understood that there would be a cost for wheeling that might be administered through a credit system with a price determined through a cost of service or based on a value of benefit for participants. But this was very general. For the stakeholders on the call and, in the room, we were wondering if there's anything you would like to add to these discussion topics. I think most of the stakeholders on the call, we did receive your feedback through this questionnaire, but please feel free to add anything at this time.
Just to clarify, so the 11 respondents were all from government agencies, government local agencies, counties,
Yes.
Yeah. And what I understand too, from when I looked at the results, is that for the responses is that a lot of them just want to make sure that lower the bills. That's kind of like a main concern, lowering the bills.
And the renewable.
And renewable, goals. Yeah. Some have the Department of Energy has a renewable goal, right? They have to hit it. So that's what's the main concern from them. Anything to add from the stakeholder or any government or state local agencies they want to add to what Abby just provided in terms of the feedback you provided us in the questionnaire? Anybody here has any questions about what's feedback? Okay. So Andrew, you have the next slide. So the next thing is about, we wanted to figure out, okay, moving forward, scheduling meetings. So we have until, typically, so the idea is to get this order out by end of November, So backward planning, we have 2 months for the decision making and then figuring if we get maybe any scheduled meetings with stakeholders by the end of August, they'll give us a month if you want to put in any statement of positions or anything like that. And then we'll have 2 months for the decision making. So it doesn't have to be August, depends whenever we feel, it's appropriate, the number of meetings. And I was kind of want to throw that out in terms of availability. We probably will likely start late January, early February, maybe the next meeting. But I wanted to get your input in terms of what you think is, workable, and we're thinking maybe at least maybe 4 or 5 meetings would be appropriate. But again, it would all depend on how we progress. We might even need more, based on the meetings we have. So any thoughts? Put it out there for anybody here in person or online.
That answered Kylie's question.
Sorry.
Kylie has.
I can't repeat that.
Yeah, I can.
Or government stakeholders asked about the quantities and locations of land they would be interested in using for renewable energy development and what have been the barriers to putting projects on those lands. Seems like getting a sense of what's available and where would help in program design. That helped.
The responses.
Well, those specific questions were not addressed by the questionnaire. It was pretty general.
Yeah, it was more asking if they're interested and how they want us to participate. And a lot of them said that they use their buildings, cited the buildings, right? I think some of the land. They didn't specify the acreage or location. Yeah, it wasn't specified.
Yeah, we asked if one of the questions was whether they were interested in wheeling, within their own organization to other organizations. Yeah, that was kind of, the most of that component.
But I think following up on Kylie's question, which I think is a good question, is did these government stakeholders even think outside of the box and say, hey, I have vacant land out here. Can I utilize these lands for wheeling? So
That's a really great point. Yeah, some government organizations did give specific scenarios that they were really interested in. I don't know if I heard DOE on the call, but they gave a couple different scenarios that they were particularly interested in. There was the one that I mentioned where of the 11 responses, there was one that was most heavily interested in not wheeling to their own organization.
Yeah, I think the DOE definitely put on different scenarios, and they are very interested in participating. Because they're talking using their own school facilities, right? Like one school might have a higher bill, like can we get a credit using from another school, that's generated, sent to the grid.
That was
go ahead.
That was the most specific it got. Basically, saying that some schools have more solar potential than other schools, and that's their area of interest, and also potentially wheeling to underserved schools. So, yeah, nothing specific like locationally, anything like that, but just general scenarios and stakeholders thought might have fallen into the scope of the proceeding.
And one thing to consider too is that we can do follow-up questions too as well. So based on this group, right, based on the feedback, we want to do follow-up questions, we can kind of put something together with the next batch of questionnaires, and we can kind of consider and we can report back on the summary feedback. That's one thing to consider too. If there's something that you feel that it's something we should be asking, let us know, especially in the next meeting. So getting back to, did anybody have anything?
Well, just based on that, if there are interest in schools, perhaps generating power to help other schools, it's likely less than 5 megawatts.
Right. Yeah.
So just to keep in mind, of the stakeholders that might potentially participate, it looks like there may be some that would like to do smaller projects, right? So I don't think we should preclude the possibility of those smaller projects. And I think it does make sense for us to follow up and seek additional information similar to what Kylie is mentioning.
And trying to go back to Siberia, is we actually have those tier systems, right? We have a 250 kW, we have above that, right? So we actually have standard contracts right there, ready to go, right? So then in the facilities process, then above that, like a 2.5 or 5, depending what highly you're on, megawatt will be a PPA, above that, yeah. So we already have those like templates in place, so that could be a starting point too, yeah.
Did those templates have something to do with SCADA? And when you might require SCADA? Is that why you have the dividing lines between sizes?
For the 250 and above.
Used 250 used to be the SCADA
Yeah.
dividing line, and then you kind of
I
raised.
think it was
1 megawatt now, right?
Yeah,
well, the small, we have small, mid-tier, and we have large, right, in the C area, I think. That's how
that's more just interconnection
Yeah.
related rather than
Yeah.
specific to this type of analysis.
But I think along Anand's point, I think we could have different tiers
Yeah.
to give a little bit more flexibility. So if
And I
something obviously affects the grid and requires a little bit more work and they are in a different category versus something that's smaller that will help, let's say, a smaller community or whatever, but won't necessarily disrupt the grid.
And like Commissioner Gill said too, that, sometimes you want a smaller one, right? But these guys don't maybe have the technical expertise, but you have a standard contract, it's a lot easier, right? This is right there. It's simple, there's no negotiations, like everything's straightforward and transparent. So maybe it helped them too, that's what we try to do with small projects, right? With CBRE, it's trying to use that standard contract to kind of facilitate the process. Yeah. They don't have to get all these attorneys to get it going. Anyway, so any other questions or comments or, okay. I just want to get back to the scheduled meeting. So again, August is with the latest, I guess would be the latest meeting we have. But did anybody have any thoughts in terms of the number of meetings you think we can start like every month or every other month? I mean, I don't know how you guys want to do this. I just wanted to get some feedback from you guys, including the people online too as well. You can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Also, I want you guys consider too, is it better to do like what you're doing now, hybrid, or is it better just to do all online? Maybe it'd be simpler to just do WebEx, I'm sure how you guys want to do that too as well for future meetings. It seems we have a lot of people online right now, yeah. Any thoughts, anybody or? Yeah.
Or in person.
That's
You're in person, but okay. You're in person? Okay, no, that's good. That's good. That's why we're here. Because I was curious, like, okay, I know there's more technical, challenges, when you do hybrid, but I just wanted to ask it out there, put it out there. So hybrid sounds like hybrid. It's like a lot of people, talk Maui and other items. Okay, so I hear more for hybrid. Anybody else, in terms of like preference, in terms of the frequency or maybe the timing? I was thinking kind of similar to what we're doing that right now, 2-hour block. You can do that, in the afternoon or in the morning, whatever's convenient, but maybe what we could do too is I think put out, just ask you guys to give us feedback,
So
the
end result of this filing is that
the end result is us to make a decision on whether we intergovernmental wheeling is in the public interest. And then based on that order, we try to attach a letter and give it to the ledge, it's kind of giving our position. Basically, because the ledge asked us to investigate right now.
And then is there an opportunity for us to find like?
Yes, exactly. So that was earlier, I was stating that the reason I'm kind of back and planning, we have 2 months, right, for the situation, November, October, November. That I was going to kind of give you guys maybe September for statement issues, right? And then, not statement, but a statement of position. And then before that, we'll have all of the stakeholder meetings. We have IRs or anything in between that, and talk about it. And then this will give us a lot of time to discuss it. And then it'll give you that month window to provide whether you guys want to do it as a group, and submit a statement of position, or you guys want to do it individually, that's fine. Okay. But then I think the first thing we need to do, we have to do, or I'm going to get into it later, is identifying the statement issues and the topics too as well, moving forward. But so what I'm hearing right now is hybrid, right? Let's start, Angie, go back. Sorry. So hybrid, right, is what most people are okay with now. Okay. And then I think about 2 hours like that. I'm thinking maybe is that good? Okay. And then frequency, do you want to do it every month or once a month, starting in February or is there something?
Turn around, so maybe monthly.
Yeah, I know. We actually put down maybe every 2 weeks, but that's kind of a lot too, though. So, yeah. Let's start with every month, and we can work. We got all adjust later. Yeah. So I think the first one will be probably around in late January, early February. The idea is that before the first meeting is for us to come out with statement of issues, also the topics, and also to provide any the procedure schedule to this one. Then we'll have the next meeting. Topics to address. I just wanted to kind of touch on that. If anybody has any topics to address, I know there's some idea about storage, right? Commissioner Yost talked about storage, as a topic to consider. Anybody else? I'm gonna throw out some things here. This is based on an order we issued, the opening order. We talked about reliability, cost effectiveness, interconnection, availability of transmission and distribution capacity, and appropriate rates and rate design, and impacts on the utility and non-participating ratepayers. So those are the things we put in the order as topics. Are you guys good with that? You want to add to it or modify it? Let me know.
I need to look at some comments that
I'm sorry. Oh,
Maybe provide.
locations,
Sorry, Commissioner.
yeah,
locations and
yeah. Okay.
design.
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna put together what we think the state issues are, and it's submitted, extend it out and file it right for feedback.
Okay.
That's the plan right now, but I just want to keep it open right now. If there's something you want to add, we can include in that filing.
Give me whatever you want. Henry.
Well, let me, Karen, I think, Shane, you bring up a good point. And yes, I think once, if it is feasible and you come up with a framework, that's really when governmental agencies are going to go and do a cost benefit. Right? You gotta know what you're gonna get benefit from before you even embark on a project, right? And so Shane, thanks for saying that. As far as Henry's solar only, I put it to the group because you know what? Every other renewable resource has been proposed and communities like them or communities don't. Right? So I'm open to whatever, but then the other part of it about it is you just not gonna, at the end of the day, you want something that everybody can do, right? Without much opposition to. If there's gonna be opposition, then Shane's thing about cost benefit goes right out the door. You're not gonna get any participation.
I do see it there that there's the wanting of the definition and the parameters of the wheeling. To echo Chair's point, the only concern that I think we do have is that don't want to stray too far from the concept of wheeling, because that was the directive given to us. If traditional wheeling where it's owned by the agency and then wheeled back to the utility, that's one thing, but when you start to get into more definitive accounting practices, it might not be wheeling under how the state legislature envisioned it. So that's the only concern that I would raise about messing too much with the definition, is that we aren't straying too far from the legislative directive that the chair has talked about here.
Well, we're using that the bill that eventually did not go anywhere, right? It got killed in committee, but it was killed in committee because of my commitment to at least have the commission take a look at these issues. So we use it as a guideline, but then, right, if we need to get into or address, here are things that might need a little bit more needs addressing, such as the economic part, right? It was not mentioned in the legislation. We're free to do that. Right? And if you come up with the framework, right, the economic framework, more power to us, right? But I'm not expecting that, right, as a product, if you will, right? Right now, it's just letting the ledge know that we all sat down and either think it's a good idea and we gotta work on some of it a little bit more, or we're gonna come up with an actual framework that we want to pilot, if you will, and then answer some questions first before you pilot, or we're gonna say, we put all our heads together and this ain't gonna work, right? It's gonna take much more time, money, resources to actually make it work. So is it now work? Is that in the public interest to do, right? I would think that not, right? We're not going to spin our wheels another 10, 20 years to really figure it out, right? We've already spent a lot of time Yeah, Shane, you bring up some good points there. Firm versus not firm, and the like. I think those are all good topics that we need to all kind of consider as we have our discussions in this working group. Future technological improvements. I mean, you can take a look at future technological improvements, but then at the end of the day, right? Are you eventually when they become not usable, but out of R&D per se, is really when you start to look at cost benefit and how you would integrate those. My experience has it's been really difficult, and in some cases, it has led to delays. Right, we can't move in doing things because we're waiting for the next best thing. Right, and we try to incorporate that, and then when it comes in, it's not what we thought it was, or we got to relook at everything. So that causes a delay in it. So I think we got to balance that out. Right? But my thinking is yes, there's always going to be technological improvements, but at some point you got to kind of say, here's what we're going to go in, right? And until that thing is more developed, right, and really commercially available, then you got to try take a look at how you incorporate that back in to the framework, whatever the framework is.
Yeah, just to add to what Kelly was saying earlier about the traditional definition of wheeling. So if that was what you use, then maybe that is a way to juxtapose it and say maybe that's not the best route, and then offer alternatives, right? Like you said, like CBRE or some other program maybe that could help accelerate the process. Because I think that's their end goal, right? So the challenges of the stage 2, stage 3 RPs, right? Because of those, they're kind of saying why how come things are not online, So then I think they're trying to figure out a way to kind of accelerate that process. And that's what I was thinking. Maybe it's not we're going to call it wheeling, we're going to call it something else. So that's kind of like what you're saying too, Peter, too earlier. But if we go that traditional route, figure out what that cost is for the transmission, right? It's going to be challenging. It's going to be, we haven't done it here, so it's going to be a challenge for us to do that too. I mean, we can look at it and see what is like it's part of that challenge to get to that point, which means more time, more cost, or we can use what's really available right now, the current tariffs rate, like the DER, the CBRE, the microgrid. So I just want to make sure we post it.
That was one of my, I guess, the question that maybe this group can look at, like, so absent wheeling.
Yeah.
Right? If there was a governmental agency, right, what would they use now? Right? If DOE wanted to go to like starting January 1, taking a look at, I have this complex, right? On Oahu, I have one school that has a lot of buildings, probably a high school, right? But my elementary school, right? They have the highest bill, right? Because that's whatever they're doing. So how can what do you got? Right? One Electric, right? PUC, what do you guys have already that we can already start going? Versus, right? What benefit would a wheeling framework give the entity, not the governmental entity? I mean, that's another way to look at it, right? And then if there is something available, then the question is, how come they're not using it? Right? Is it something in that process that the governmental agency is not seeing, like as a benefit or whatever?
We had actually Maui County come to us regarding CBRE and asked them, how can we use CBRE, right? And that we discussed them that it's a possibility. In fact, if you look at the capacity, we have over 250 megawatts, right? And we're hardly using most of it. I think we're at that 33, I don't know what megawatts, we actually online or close to being online or allocated. So there's a lot of capacity still there, that's been, kind of like out, just in reserve, right? For CBRE, the other entities can use it. And we already have tariffs set up already for it. Yeah. So I mean, it's something as an alternative, right?
Yeah. But I think you need to take a look at that.
Oh yeah, we have to adjust it too. It's not going to be one for one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, Andrew, next slide. Okay, so next steps. So like I mentioned earlier, I think we need to identify, statement of issues, and mainly it's kind of, one is like, I can think up top of it, and then again, this is all going to be filed feedback from the stakeholders. One would be, whether wheeling is in, we're defining wheeling first. If wheeling is in the public interest, and what other alternatives, that could be some of the statement issues. And we'll put that together, send it out, and see if people are, in agreement with that. Hopefully we can get all this settled before the next meeting in, say, early February. The next thing too, we wanted to is file a procedure schedule to make sure we have everything down. We'll do like maybe once a month for now. And then also then we start scheduling stakeholder meetings. We'll work with you guys with that too as well. That's all I have for now. Do you have anybody has any questions or anything? It's not. I know we're a little early, which is good. We have 19 minutes. Yeah, 105. So I just want to thank everybody for taking the time right now. I know it's the holiday season, so it's kind of difficult to schedule. I know some people are off, but it's good. It's recorded, so those who couldn't make it, we'll make sure they have an opportunity to view it as well. And again, we'll be filing, the definition and the topics, and statement issues for your feedback. Then we'll proceed from there with the procedure schedule as well. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.